Now, well, let's first start with just a brief introduction about you, because, well, the funny part is that I actually watched our first call back today because I'm trying to improve my own skills, and which is why I also watched our call back. But we know each other for I think 2 months, 3 months
Yeah,
now.
and it feels much longer than that.
A lot.
Usually good, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I mean we've been through so many things together in the past 2 months. We've accomplished so much, so it just feels like a much longer period of time.
It does, right? But just for like the people watching who don't know you, I mean, I by now know you, but can you just give a brief introduction?
Absolutely. There might be a discrepancy between my description and yours, but the way I would describe myself, Morris, would be, I mean, in general, I would like to think of myself as a loving father, a loving son, a good husband, and a good friend, and a good
Hmm.
listener, especially at work, right? Um, that's in general. But I would say that on a professional kind of level, I am the obsessed person, obsessed with service primarily, but also obsessed with continuous improvement. Hence the name of the company, which we'll get to in a second. So I date back 20 years. That's when I started my career, right? And I've been in gaming for around about 15 years.
Hmm.
Predominantly, I love startups more than big corporate machines. So getting your hands dirty, building everything from the ground up. And of course, that's enabled me to be involved in so many different things, getting your hands dirty, as they say. And of course, that's how you learn. No
Hmm.
shortcuts taken, and I've made my way through to where I am today, of course. And just fast forwarding 15 years, we've last year we've actually come up with this idea to build a company. Um, and of course, we just wanted the company to be more meaningful than just a company. It just needs to have values behind it. It needs to have a meaning. It needs to have a purpose. Um,
Hmm.
and today I'm the CEO of KYZEN, which offers services to iGaming companies predominantly in three different areas. But I'm sure that you'll ask more questions regarding that, so we can stop at that.
I mean, feel free to go ahead.
That's okay. I'll have the chance to do that, I'm sure.
Okay, we will see. Yeah, that's a good introduction. And and if you had to describe yourself in, well, if others would describe you in one sentence, for example, Stolla or Savior, I think they're the best to actually do it. Or if you had to describe yourself in 3 to 5 words, how would you do that?
Okay, starting with your first question, if others were to describe me, I believe it would depend on who would do that, right? And
Of
at
course.
which moment in life they would have kind of met me. What were the circumstances at that time, so on and so forth. But specifically, mentioning two of the co-founders of Kaizen, close two workers of mine, Stola and Xavier, I would say briefly, they would say he's demanding, but he's a good leader, or at least that's what I'm hoping that they would say. Um, then, in terms of how I would describe myself, right? Five
Uh-huh.
five words. I would just limit that to one word without any thinking, Morris. I would just limit that to obsessed. Um, and of course, obsession is not necessarily good when it comes to anything, right? There needs to be balance. Balance is very important in life, but
Hmm.
there's this natural obsession that comes from within me when it comes to being a bit better today than I was yesterday, whatever that is, right? Depending on the personal goals of that individual. Could be, I know, could be something related to work, could be your relationship, could be your family. could be something that you just enjoy doing. But my main purpose, I would say, in life is just to give it my all, and become better every day.
Isn't it interesting? In every single person is a different. In every single person, you exist in a different way. They see you in a different way.
Absolutely, absolutely.
But I think your description is very accurate, to be honest.
Yes, my own interpretation of myself, I would say.
Yeah, it's an accurate one. I think I was watching that call back, and uh, I really enjoyed it, even watching it back, to be honest. But even then, it was very observant. Just um, what's the proper term for it? Like just very observant and trying to acquire knowledge, not per se judgmental in any way, but just trying to find information and the right answer.
Absolutely. I mean, with obsession also comes focus, right? There's only so much time in our lives, and of course we need to be I don't know, sons, daughters. We need to be parents. If there's kids involved, we need to be friends. We need to sleep. We need to eat, so on and so forth, right? So, like I said, there's only so much time. So it's absolutely fundamental to just focus on the important things in life, what matters most. And that's what I obviously try and do. Most of the time I succeed, but obviously
Yeah,
sometimes it's not that easy to focus.
it's hard, man, and there's but there's only a very limited amount of things that really do matter. But what motivated you to start with Kaizen at the end of 2023?
Yeah. I mean, from a very young age, just looking back, one thing that I discovered early in life, I would say, and by early I mean probably early 20s, right, is what I wanted to do in life, meaning 15 years ago now. The plan was clear. So, what I've accomplished today is what I've planned for myself 15 years back. Maybe the timelines were not that accurate, but the end goals were as they are today. I mean, the destination should not change, but of course the route is gonna change many times.
Yeah.
But ultimately, the most important thing is that you just end up at your ultimate destination. So my desire was always to run businesses, and I've done that for the past 10, 20 years, I would say. Main difference was obviously that I ran other people's businesses. But I've learned so much doing that, and by that I mean you don't just learn what works, but equally and as importantly, you learn what doesn't. So we just felt that, I mean, it's never the right time to do anything, Morris. At least that's how I feel, right? It's never the right time to have the first kid, never the right time to have the second, never the right time to take that trip to Thailand or start a company. But obviously,
Yeah.
time keeps on going by. So the best way to do something is just by doing it and then just winging it along the way. I mean, if you have that mindset, which I know you do, where you know you're going into something, it's not going to be perfect, you're going to make mistakes along the way, but you're completely fine with that because you'll just adapt and you'll grow and you'll continue improving yourself. Then you just need to jump right into it, right? So that's what we actually did. And by we, I mean myself, Xavier, and Ståle. We worked in a company and we worked pretty much, we wore the same hats as we do today, more or less, right? So we worked well together. We were all experts in our respective field. And then this opportunity came along, and the rest is history. It's been a tremendous 15 months, I would say. And we're very much looking forward to the next 15 months.
What a beautiful story. Yeah, you have this Chinese saying, right? The best time to start was 20 years ago, and the second best is today.
Absolutely. I mean,
For
absolutely.
me, that's a bit difficult 20 years ago, but
Yeah. But obviously, in hindsight, everyone's smart. Things are very easy in hindsight. So you just need to start, and you just need to do it today, like you said. There's no tomorrow. um, and I can be quite, I can be quite pushy, and I can put quite a bit of pressure on other people around me, not necessarily just at work, but even in my personal life, right? And in my household, for example, because I go by that mantra. But like I said earlier on during this call, there's only so much time, so I just want to make the most out of it. So no wasting time, just start today.
it's almost as if I hear myself talk there.
Yeah, I know that you and I have a lot in common. We've had lengthy discussions during these 2 months.
Yeah, we had. But what's the most valuable lesson that you have learned now in the CEO role? Or maybe also what's something you learned before the role but had to relearn because you were in this position?
Okay. I mean, look, in general, generically, the best lesson, not tied to this role, but the best lesson life has taught me was hitting rock bottom. Because once you do that, the only way is actually up. So there's so many things that you actually learn when you scrape the bottom. But then in terms of this role, if I had to learn, I mean, there's so many things that I had to learn, right, as a CEO. My previous roles, none of which included that title. So taking a step back would probably be the main thing that I had to learn. And by taking a step back, I don't mean just, delegating stuff and watching a game on TV, but just thinking about the bigger picture, just making sure that all of the components are working towards your trajectory, which is the end goal. But you don't necessarily have to be involved in the nitty gritty, for better lack of better terms, right? You just need to make sure that all of the components are moving in the right direction. So that is the main thing that I've had to learn, I would say.
That's easier said than done. I always tend to default back to I will just do it because
Yeah,
especially when you know how to do it better or how to do it in a different way that you think is better, but then you have to let go of the idea of perfection, which is sometimes difficult.
absolutely. I mean, just sounds easier said than done, right? Sounds very
Yeah.
easy to some, just to let things go and let others run with them. But especially if the person is a perfectionist, which I tend to be, it's quite hard. And there's books completely dedicated to the art of delegation, which I have gone through and which I have read over the years. And I would say that it's an art in itself to just learn how to delegate stuff and just overlook the process as opposed to doing things yourself. Because, like you said, if you want something done right, you just do it yourself. But by doing that, what you're doing is there's only a limited time, like we keep on saying. So you're just limiting your ability as a company to achieve more.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a balance between the two, right? So it's the same with the CEO of the like publicly traded company I told you about, like he had with his 20-80-20 rule of him saying it's more important to get it done than to do it right. That's
Yeah, yeah, and I wish I could turn my camera around. The only banner or poster that I have here hanging in this room with me says "Get shit done." If we can say that, I'm sure it's fine. And recently on LinkedIn, I've actually written a piece about the 80-20 rule. I mean, one rule that I live by is you have 30 seconds to make a decision, right? Or most decisions need to be done within 30 seconds, knowing that 80% of the time you're going to get that right. 20% of the time you're not going to get that right. And you just need to be comfortable with that idea, because otherwise, and I've been personally victim of this for many years in the past, you just end up spending 3 or 4 times the amount of time trying to get that task up from 80 to say 85 or 90, never to perfection. So 80-20 is definitely the right balance.
Yeah, it is. But it's easier said than done, unfortunately. But you always had the vision of starting your own company and or in it being involved in making startups bigger. If you look back and your 20-year-old self, would you expect to be here or would you expect to be somewhere else? But like, what was your vision at 38?
Yeah, again, good question. From memory, what I can tell you is that when I was in my early 20s, I had goals, and I call these the SMART goals, right? Specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely. So
Uh-huh.
from a very young age, I always found it extremely helpful to just jot down ideas on paper into goals, then from goals into smaller deliverables, then from smaller deliverables into an actual action plan, which you just execute, right? Because so many people have so many brilliant ideas, but the problem is the execution part. They
Yeah.
either never get round to executing them, or they start executing them because there's motivation, but that motivation tends to abandon us sometimes, and discipline does not kick in to replace that motivation. And we just go by as we normally do. So,
Hmm.
going back to your question though, when I was 20-ish years old, um, I wouldn't say I really pictured myself at the age of 38, but I can tell you that I used to picture myself at the age of 30. And I had this vision in my head, right? I've always used to say that by the time I'm 30 years old, I'm going to have a
Uh-huh.
doctorate. That's one thing, because as we've discussed in the past, I used to be a very avid academic, right?
Yes.
So that's definitely one thing. Then the second thing would be I'm gonna be married, happily married. I'm gonna have a family, kid or two, some pets as well, and definitely in my career, I'm gonna have my own company along with
Hmm.
other things, right? But the interesting part is that I hit 30 8 years ago. And when I did hit 30, I had accomplished some of those things that I had jotted down a decade back, but not all of that. But one thing I realized, Morris, and I must tell you that probably this was also one of the biggest learning curves in my life, right?
Hmm.
I used to believe not sure whether I used to genuinely believe or whether I used to trick my brain into believing that as soon as I tick those goals off of my list, I'm gonna feel different. I'm gonna feel more accomplished. I'm gonna feel more happy. But that's definitely not the case in life. You just need to enjoy every part of the journey, every moment that you can, right? So when I reached 30, I've achieved some of that. I did not achieve all of the tasks on the list, but I can share with you that I have actually achieved everything on that list this year, upon turning 38. There's some other things which I did not mention, but those have also been ticked off. So the next thing now is what's next, right? What goals, what meaningful goals should I set for myself for the coming decade or two? And I can just share with you that one of the main goals now in my life is giving back. Goals do not necessarily align with my goals from 10 years ago. Goals just change moving forward.
So the biggest lesson was that you should enjoy the journey and not the goal, achieving the goal.
Yeah, one of the biggest lessons I would say is definitely not thinking in any way, shape, or form that once you hit those goals, there's this magic switch that's gonna go on, which will make you feel completely different, because it will not. So it makes you feel accomplished for a while, but that feeling will vanish. And once that feeling, vanishes, then that's the challenging part. So super important to actually reward yourself and enjoy every bit of the moment, even if it's a struggle, even if it's a painful moment. You just try and make the most out of that moment, because that's also a beautiful part of the journey. Maybe not at the time, but retrospectively it is.
It's a part of life, right? So you should
Also, yeah,
enjoy life, not just the positive side of life.
indeed.
Yeah, that's a good lesson, which I try to apply every day.
Please do.
And now you're trying, but before we get into the next stage, like let's get into the now. So you've built Kaizen together with Stolle and Xavier. If you want to, I mean, you can give a brief overview just so that everyone knows what Kaizen does. If
Absolutely. So, as we briefly mentioned before, Kaizen offers three services predominantly, but not just, to the iGaming industry. So, the first one of which is customer service, native customer support mainly, 24/7. And then there's risk payments and fraud, anything from customer payouts to KYC. And then ultimately, payment IQ, orchestration, platform management. So basically we have the expertise to go into the payment IQ setup or a similar setup, say Praxis, for example, and we can integrate new payment methods, we can improve acceptance rates, so on and so forth. So those would be the three services that we offer today.
Yes. But we already went there a bit, but in terms of I asked what changed compared to what you did previously, but also what are you trying to build? Like what's the what are the core values you're trying to install, not only within Kaizen, but also try to share with partners?
Yeah, that's a deep question, isn't it? Because Kaizen goes well beyond profit margins. I mean, of course, you need healthy profit margins to keep this engine going, right? It's part of the game of business, isn't it?
Yeah, it
But
is.
but I think that what we're trying to create here is much bigger than that. We're trying to create a legacy to begin
Mm-hmm.
with, and we're also trying to create or define a new meaning for culture. So many times out there, particularly in the iGaming industry, but not just limited to that. I just feel like there's this very wrong definition of what culture means. I mean, if I had to very briefly explain that to you, I think that culture is the feeling in your belly on a Sunday evening, right? Knowing that you have to go back to work or report back into work on a Monday
Mm-hmm.
morning. So, what we're trying to create is a workplace where people actually look forward to Monday mornings as much as I do.
Mm-hmm.
And beyond just a paycheck or learning new skills or learning new knowledge or making friends at work, one very satisfying factor, and that's partly what I mean by legacy here, is when I meet people, say 10 years after I would have worked with them, and they would actually come up to me and say, remember that time when we discussed this topic, or when you've given me this advice. Here's what I did, and here's where I am today, thanks to that. And that, for me, Morris, is 10 times more rewarding than a bigger balance in a bank account, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I would say that those are the two main factors in terms of what we're trying to build today. But I will add a third, and that is service. Part of my
Mm-hmm.
obsession is definitely service, right? And I just think that service is underestimated by so many, almost taken for granted many times. Um, but it's so important at the same time, isn't it? I mean, if we just take the iGaming industry as an example, online iGaming industry,
Mm-hmm.
when a player actually logs onto a site, a casino, and there's hundreds of them, right? How would they select one? And even more than that, how would they stick around for long enough? And there's only a few criterion, I think, that actually contribute towards that, because a lot of operators use the same games, use the
Yeah.
same payment methods, um, similar bonuses, so on and so forth. So, what are the unique differentiators? What are the USPs out there, right? You can have better UI UX. That could be one. Um, you can have better technology. That can also be another, I would say. But service is definitely one of them. I mean, service is one of those things that is very hard to replicate. And mainly
Mm-hmm.
that's because service, maybe not fully, but a major part of service is actually driven or delivered by human beings. And no human being is actually the same as another human being, right? All of us
Mm-hmm.
are unique. So in delivering not just good service, but actually great service, you create a feeling. And I think that that feeling is actually one of the main drivers that keeps players on coming back.
What an answer. Getting back to the first point, I think it's going to be difficult to make people more excited to work on a Monday morning than you. But I
Yeah,
mean,
I just want to get rid of the TGIF. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that saying, but it's a saying I say. Thank God it's Friday.
oh,
I just hate that, you know? I just want to replace that with TGIM. Thank God it's Monday. That is
I forget which day it is, and I
yeah.
just work on Saturday and Sunday. So I mean, you installed that feeling within me, but I already had it before.
Yeah, then that doesn't really count then, does it?
I mean, uh,
Contributing towards that.
every person who has that feeling is good, right? Is a good
Absolutely.
extra.
Yeah.
But delivering that service, that reminds me of Elon Musk saying the thing like how many companies are actually producing something which you actually are looking forward to getting. There are not a lot of products that you actually, or services that you actually want and you're actually looking forward to being in touch again or getting overall.
Yeah, and just to add to that, Morris, I would definitely differentiate between needing and wanting. Massive difference between something you need and something you want. Um, and even though I would love for our customers to want our service, it's definitely something that they need. So by default, I am no salesman, right? And the way we normally sell our services to clients is not by convincing them that they need our service or that our
Hmm.
service is one of the best out there, but by helping them understand themselves why it is that they need our service and how our service is actually gonna contribute towards growing their business, which is a bit different in the way that works vis-a-vis or versus the traditional selling mechanism, I would say.
Education-based marketing, right?
Indeed.
Don't sell, educate, or provide value.
Yeah.
And why did you decide to go in the iGaming space? Was that accidental or
Yeah,
what
that
how did that
actually puts
happen?
a smile on my face, because back in the days, um, 15 years ago, that is, I used to actually work for a penny auction site. Not quite sure whether you or any of our listeners are familiar with the term, but basically, it's a concept which sits in between retail and gaming, right? So there's an element of skill, which
Hmm.
is it's the gamification of retail basically. So people bid towards an item. So say there's an iPhone being put up for auction, um, and you and I are competing for that item. So you buy what are called bids, and I buy what are called bids. And then there would be a timer which resets every 15-30 seconds. So I'm placing a bid and I'm
Hmm.
incrementing or increasing the price of this item by 1 cent every time I bid. And then the timer goes down to almost zero. Then you bid. And by doing so, you're increasing the price by another penny. And the timer
Hmm.
resets itself. And we just keep on doing that. Now, say we do that 100 times on an iPhone, okay? Um, what that means is that the price of that iPhone now is €1 because it's
Hmm.
100 cents. We've bid 100 times, and that sells for €1. But the true mechanism behind that is that we purchase those bids at a price. So, say each bid costs €1, then that would mean that the company has actually received €100 and that phone sold for €100 and not €1. And of
Hmm.
course, this not might not be the perfect example because an iPhone does not sell for €100. It does sell for more, but in principle, that is how the mechanism works. And remember just being fascinated by this mechanism, right? And then I discovered gaming, and I just saw that so much knowledge is actually interchangeable, meaning it could be applied across the penny auction industry over to the iGaming industry, whether that was customer support or payments or fraud or operations, so on and so forth. I mean, the concept, the foundation was actually the same. The detail
Hmm.
was different. So I took my first job 15 years ago at a company by the name of BetClick, and I was equally fascinated, I would say, by the concept of iGaming. I mean, my main passion lies for operations. I'm just fascinated by the different mechanisms of an online, mainly online organization, and how everything just needs to work in tandem, like the rotary engine of a watch, right? The minute
Hmm.
one part of an engine breaks, then the watch is gonna malfunction. So that just keeps on captivating me 15 years after, and I bet you that it's gonna, keep on captivating me for the decades
Another
to come.
15 years.
Yeah,
Yeah. So that's how it all started.
absolutely.
What interesting. With the what is it? The all the diplomas and the did you looking back, would you have done it differently if you look back at it now?
Yeah. Um, uh, in hindsight, like I said, everything is so much clearer. Um,
Hmm.
I would have still done the same in part, right? Meaning I wouldn't have spent probably 12 or maybe even more years studying and pursuing diplomas and a degree and a master's degree and then a doctorate that I had started.
Hmm.
Um, and this all depends on what you want out of life. Meaning, if someone wants to become, say, a doctor, then
Hmm.
by default, you would need to go to medical school and actually get that certificate. And there's a lot of other similar areas out there where you would need to do the same. But when it does come to business, I think what academics actually do is they teach you how to be disciplined, as an example. Um, they actually teach you how to be patient,
Hmm.
and there's other qualities that they do actually teach you. But then conversely, there's other things which did not work in my favor, right? And one example would be, in academics, normally the answer is either right or wrong. But as we both know, in life and especially in business, doesn't really work like that, right? I mean, it's most of the time it's trial and error.
It is, yeah.
So changing that mindset was very hard for me. So just to answer your question now, in hindsight, I would definitely limit the amount of knowledge that I actually took in to maybe
Hmm.
20% of the 100%, and I would limit my time, effort, and energy, the remaining 80%, towards just starting a business earlier in life, for example, because the amount of knowledge you accumulate by actually doing versus just studying is tremendous. And of course, it's completely, different when you read something and when you actually experience something, because there's so many variables that are introduced by doing that you don't get to experience by just reading and studying. Like, you
Yeah.
know, you might be a genius in cash flow on paper, but running the business actually introduces feelings, for instance, and you wouldn't have been taught how to manage those feelings. So, very interesting indeed, though.
It is, yeah. Yeah. It's interesting that you mention feelings as well. I used to have a friend who is a trader, and the most difficult part about trading is the feeling that you're losing out on money, not the trading itself.
Yeah, indeed. Indeed, Morris.
This, so that's an interesting variable.
Indeed, and if I just may add to that, I do remember when Bitcoin was starting to become popular. Just like many others, I used to spend hours staring at that screen, and sometimes even I used to even have problems falling asleep. And it's a game of discipline, right? I mean, unless you're a day trader, um, I just, hear from people like Warren Buffett or other very successful entrepreneurs in this area. And they all share one common thing: invest for the long term. And that is something that I did not have the ability to do back then, right? Kept on um, buying when it's high, selling when it's low, basically. So again, ties to what we were saying before. You can learn on paper, but in real life, everything tends to turn out different.
It does, yeah, it does. So the history doesn't really matter in that sense, but it still gives us data to move forward, to make better decisions moving forward.
Yeah.
Which is also why I had that conversation with ChatGPT a few weeks ago. I always have conversations with ChatGPT about things which are going on in my life, but about growth and how you can, instead of making it accidental, which is for most people how it goes, making it more structured moving forward. But yeah, um, but the history doesn't really matter eventually because it's already happened.
Yeah, I guess history is quite important for us to look retrospectively and be able to learn from what happened in the past and just project that into the future.
Yes. So now you don't no longer trade on Bitcoin.
No, I don't.
It's eating away so much energy as well for doing like things that actually matter.
I mean, it does matter to those people that actually have the ability to do it properly because Bitcoin has hit an all-time high. So of course,
Yes.
in hindsight, I just wish I had
You bought,
left those bitcoins alone. I did actually buy them. Problem was not buying them. Problem was just leaving them alone. Let them be. When I bought Bitcoin back in the days, I remember buying them at 3,000 euros a Bitcoin, and they're
ooh,
what 100,000 today. So
yeah. I think the all-time high hit 108,000, but
yeah, so pointless
Merry
crying over
Christmas.
spilled milk, though.
It is, yeah. But what did it teach you for business right now? Being more patient with,
Yeah, I mean,
or
definitely, Morris, definitely. Must confess that patience is definitely not my strongest suit. Um, but patience is definitely an important, factor in life, and you know, there needs to be a balance between being patient for too long and just seeking for almost immediate results. because patience does not apply to all of the different situations, and instant gratification doesn't apply to all of the different situations either. But
Hmm.
I think that experience in life tends to teach you where you need to be patient and when you actually need to have the ability or a good sense of judgment to let something go. Otherwise, that patience is going to turn into hope, and hope doesn't always turn out to be a successful story, right? I mean,
Hope isn't a good strategy. There's this. There always is a quote around almost everything, and I usually know them as well. But um, there's this one which is be impatience with action, but patience with results.
that's a good saying.
It is, and and it applies to how you're already living life by pressuring people into doing things.
Healthy pressure, of course.
It is, it is. Yeah, that's the thing. Usually people delay things without any good reason. If you really think about it, like how long does it actually take that to send that message to someone or to do that thing on your to-do list, which has been pushed forward for 2 weeks now? Like how long does it actually take? It looks so much bigger, or it it seems to be so much taking so much more time in your head, but in essence, it's just 5 minutes, 30 minutes maybe. Just do the
Absolutely.
work.
And I think you've just nailed it. Human beings are a creature of habit.
Yes.
And everyone is, I don't doubt for a second when someone tells me that they're busy, but are we busy on the right things? Because, essentially the difference between you and I and between us and any other human being, in the world is not that they're getting more hours during the day, it's that they're doing different things during that same
Yeah.
same time span. So just a question for personal reflection: are we busy on the right things?
Yeah, and usually that's not the case. I always used to hate it when people told me that they're busy, because you're not busy, you just have different priorities, which is why you say you're busy. Um, but I always used to hate it as it's a deeper rooted
Busy is a state
emotional
of mind.
thing. It is, yeah,
So I
it
can
is.
obviously spend a day staring at something or obsessing over something which is not that important, but that still classifies as being busy. So when I'm stuck in this kind of mindset from time to time, I'm just trying to take a step back and ask myself that question: is this the most important task? Because sometimes or most times people actually end up doing what they're comfortable doing or what they
Yeah.
enjoy doing, and they're not doing what the business, for example, necessarily needs to be done, right? So
Yeah, humans act as energy, right? So if you have two iron pins in a wooden block, then and you try to let energy go from, or electricity go from iron pin 1 to iron pin 2, then it always has this like imperfect route to go to the other pin, because it's looking for the route with the least resistance. And humans are the exact same. We're always looking for the path with least resistance. Even and usually they're looking for the path with the least resistance right now, which means that they will have a harder life later on. But if you take a longer term view on it, it's easier to do another action.
absolutely agree with that.
But also, I always, when I tend to work on things, I always try to think as well, like, am I doing it in the most efficient way? And that annoys me. Like that's that's the beautiful time of the year where we can reflect and look back at what we have done in the past year, and if we could have done anything differently or better, right? So I'm trying to learn from that right now to improve.
Yeah, continuous improvement, right?
Exactly. Yes, it's a beautiful name. From an SEO standpoint, it could have been a better one. But then, I mean, that's fine. The decision is already made. And what do you think are could be improved in this industry overall? Like, what do you think others in the industry are doing, which should be done differently, or is just a not the right way to look at it overall?
Okay. I mean, in general, I just feel like there's been lack of innovation.
Uh-huh.
And what I do mean by that is that there's a lot of similarities. There's a lot of overlapping. Um, so, without repeating myself, Morris, I would like to see operators paying more attention to service, as an example, or anything
Hmm.
else that can actually give them a unique, sustainable, competitive advantage.
That's easier said than done. So, but I mean, yeah, that's usually what technology is, right? Just people uh, improving a certain technology which already exists. So, what do you think is the most overlooked opportunity right now?
Being different, I would say that, simply because, if you're looking at a competitor, um,
Hmm.
and something's proven to work, then obviously, that's fantastic. Um, you One big mistake I've made in my life, Morris, is I've waited unnecessarily, probably more than a decade, um, and I'm still waiting, by the way, to come up with this unique idea that doesn't exist out there, right?
Uh-huh.
But it doesn't have to be like that, right? It doesn't have to be a new idea. I mean, chances and odds are your idea does exist out there. So if it
Hmm.
does, then you just need to do it better. How is it done better? It's done better by improving on it. How is it improved upon? But by doing it differently, because obviously, if you copy something exactly in the same manner someone else is doing it, then the result is almost certainly gonna be the same, right?
Hmm.
So I would just dare companies out there, and I know it's a bit ambiguous, right? But I would just dare companies, therefore people behind these companies, not to be afraid to make more mistakes, to be more bold, whether that means campaigns or whether that means um, design, whatever that is, just more innovation. And by innovation, I don't necessarily mean a new currency, right? I
Hmm.
mean, that would be nice, but it can be as minuscule as can be. But I just want to see more uniqueness in the industry.
I mean, nowadays building a new currency is not that difficult. Um, so it might be an option, but it's definitely a good one. More authenticity.
More authenticity is exactly what the word I was looking for. Exactly.
So, well, I mean, we are starting with that today. But yeah, that's definitely a good one. But usually companies are too afraid to exclude a certain group of people just by saying certain things, even though by saying that they will probably be more appealing to another group of people.
I mean, in all fairness, Morris, by default, in comparison to other industries, say traditional banks, for example,
Hmm.
the iGaming industry is much more innovative. operates at a much faster pace, right? So if I'm comparing this industry to other different industries, then my answer would probably be different. But if we're comparing the different operators within the same industry, then my answer stands.
Yeah. It's yes, I like Shroud said, right? It's a green field. It's still very innovative, but there's room to improve. That being said, we already went there, but what's next? Like you already said, like 20 years from now, I have a certain plan. We didn't go there yet. You said something around giving back, but what's the next step?
For me as a person, or for the company, or both?
For both, yeah.
Okay. No, I mean, look, in terms of me as an individual, right? Like I've mentioned earlier, the first set of goals took 2 decades to accomplish, but they have.
Hmm.
Fantastic. So, what's the next decade? What are the next two decades actually going to bring? And even though I aspire, and of course I'll continue to strive to become better, to grow
Hmm.
this business, to probably open up more businesses, um, comes by age, I think. Also comes with experience and enough, seen similar things happening with other people too. But
Hmm.
giving back to the community is definitely something um, at the back of my head, right? As an example, we did not post about it, but this year we've started with Kaizen.
Hmm.
We've actually purchased stuff which this orphanage in a specific country needed, and
Hmm.
we've had employees, members of our staff, delivering that to this orphanage, right? And might not have been tens of thousands of euros, but I can tell you one thing more is the sense of satisfaction that actually brings is can't be compared to any other achievement out there, you know. So I definitely, personally, and we definitely, as a company, will keep on focusing on that. So I would say that giving back to the community is at the very top of what I'll be focusing on in the coming decade or two.
Just giving back. And in terms of building new companies, is there anything in mind which is already, or it's just an idea and we'll see
Yeah,
what happens? Or
I mean, there again, just trying to find the right balance between diversification
hmm.
and strategic focus, meaning there's a risk that if the timing's not right, if you move too rapidly, albeit I love moving rapidly, um,
Hmm.
you risk drifting, which I call strategic drift, at the expense of what you're currently building. So for the coming 1, 2, 3 years, I would say I would love to, and it makes sense for me to actually focus on continuing to solidify the foundation of Kaizen, right?
Hmm.
Um, and building its potential. I mean, we've only just got started 1 year, 3 months ago, and fast forward to today. Post actually went out earlier today. We're 40 people, 40 members of staff. We're servicing more than 30 operators out there, or 30
Hmm.
brands to be precise, so on and so forth. So looking back, we've accomplished so much already, but we haven't even started to scratch the surface. The potential out there is just tremendous, right? So in the near future, I'd love to continue expanding, continue offering our services to other operators within the industry. And then as a next step, I'd love for us to continue focusing on those 3 services and branching out to other industries. Specifically, I would say the Forex industry. There's a lot of similarities when it comes to the Forex industry and the iGaming industry, at least in terms of the services that we offer. So I'd love to branch those out. And then once the company reaches a certain size, then who knows, sky's the limit. There's definitely not a lack of ideas, right? That's definitely not the problem, but I just need to be very mindful of the timing. The timing definitely needs to be right. So I don't think it's the right time now to build new companies doing completely different things, but it's something that I'll definitely be doing in the future after focusing more on Kaizen.
After another 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, 1 to 3 years, I'm sure.